Welcome to the Analyst View by Capital Group, a podcast series that offers concise, investment-centric dialogues. In each episode, they'll deep dive with Capital Group's analysts to bring you focused discussions on sectors and themes shaping the investment landscape. Straight to the point conversations designed to provide you with the knowledge you need. In this episode, Investment Director Andrew Lee speaks to equity investment analyst Celia Huey about current investment opportunities in China, innovation in the technology and healthcare sectors, and the benefits of local fundamental research.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Lee, Equity Investment Director at Capital Group, based in Hong Kong. And I'm here with Celia Huey, Equity Investment Analyst who's also based here in Hong Kong, with a research coverage that focuses on North Asia, as well as information technology and healthcare in China, amongst other things. So today, we're going to have a conversation around the investment opportunities in China and Asia more broadly, and insights that can really be found and distilled through deep fundamental research. Celia, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
So I understand that you've recently been to China and have met with a lot of different companies there. Can you please walk us through what's the investment sentiment on the ground these days? And how does that compare to the trips that you've done previously in the past years?
Yeah, we had a very fruitful trip to China about a month ago. Now, I just wanted to remind everyone that the Chinese market has been under a lot of duress. Walking back to about 5 years ago, you have the government that was bearing down hard on the education industry, on the internet industry. And then after that, it was COVID. And then, of course, the post-COVID recovery was a lot more muted than most people had expected. After that, it was a property crisis. So it was one thing after another, culminating in a question about investability of the Chinese equity market. So when I went back this time, I saw that, the sentiment has really shifted. Now, I think it's boosted by a couple of things. I think some of these Chinese manufacturing champions that we all know about, BYD, solar industries, those have undoubtedly boosted people's confidence. But more recently, we also have, some of the China soft power. For example, TikTok. For example, Labubu, which is a creation of a Chinese IP company. Those are the kind of little DeepSeek moments that got everyone excited in China. So I think the sentiment has obviously shifted for the better.
So a lot better in terms of sentiment this year. And I think that also underpinned the share price performance that
Yeah.
we're seeing so far year to date in Chinese equities. So Celia, I've read one of your recent research reports, and I was struck by a comment you made about DeepSeek, which is that the DeepSeek moment is not exclusive to the information technology sector, but sprouting across other industries. And you've just touched on that earlier on. Can you unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah. So to me, I'm sure, the audience here would understand, what the DeepSeek moment is. So this happened around the end of last year and early this year when a little known Chinese company called DeepSeek developed an LLM for, $6 million versus the hundreds of millions that Western companies have spent on LLMs. The results were astonishing for the world. So what that says to me, the DeepSeek moment, is that for some reason, Chinese companies, because of their different starting point, the different endowment and constraints, they would find ingenious ways to get to a similar outcome differently from the Western world. I'm seeing this DeepSeek moment. By that, I just mean, innovation with Chinese characteristic playing out across different industries. We know about the solar industry where China literally dominates in 90% of the supply chain. We also see it playing out in BYD, in EVs. They just somehow do things differently. And I chalk it up to two reasons. One is China has an enormous amount of knowledge workers. They have, they graduate hundreds of thousands of computer programmers, research scientists in the medical field. And and the second attribute that's really relevant in the Chinese context is that companies and people are extremely hardworking and competitive. So that sets the stage those are the ingredients that give us the DeepSeek moments. Now, as I've discussed before, we've seen it in EVs, we've seen it in solar, but similar DeepSeek moments have been unfolding across different industries. In medical equipment, we have, companies like MyWay who've been selling, very excellent price performance equipment, medical equipment like ultrasound, in vitro, diagnosis equipment overseas for a fraction of the cost. We've been seeing Xiaomi, which has been launching smartphones with excellent features at, about $200. Some of these features are not even available on an iPhone, so on and so forth. A lot of these are, on the cusp of happening, of unfolding. So I think, it's really interesting, if we can identify these Chinese companies that are on their front foot, as well as avoiding the Western companies that could be hurt by these Chinese DeepSeek moments. I think those are the topics that we're wrestling with.
So, staying on the topic of tech and AI, it seems to me that there's been an increasing debate between AI infrastructure versus AI devices on near to medium term investability. What's your thought on that? And if you have to pick between the two, and I know this is as tough and challenging as if asking your children which one is their more favorite parent, but which one do you see more investment potential?
Well, I'm sure my children would unequivocally say I'm the favorite parent. Very easy. Andrew, this is a great question, but I just want to, backtrack a little bit to talk about our involvement with AI investments. I think we started first in 2022 when, semiconductor production equipment sector was, under duress. At that time, we started, to kind of sniff around the space, and that was coincidentally at the time when the idea of AI started bubbling under the surface. So we started out by investing in certain Japanese back-end equipment companies that command 80% market share. We got involved in 2022 and we sold out in 2024 because ultimately equipment, it's a second derivative. Ahead of AI investment, you need to have the equipment ready. But that investment has kind of, reached the end of its life. The second thing we invested in over the past year have been AI infrastructure. Now that, it runs the gamut. For example, in networking, in infrastructure components, rail kits, all of the components that go into building a data center. We're well positioned there and it's, actively being played out. Then I think thirdly is investment in AI on the edge. Now, this has still not come to fruition, but we are well positioned. If you think about, where we are right now, LLMs are, being built out. The training aspect is almost all done. Now we have, in model reasoning, that is the next thing that is about to go into prime time. So, we are well positioned, to think about what is next in AI. And I think that, the two trains of thoughts, one is AI for the enterprise. In that arena, we think that industrial PC has a very good chance of combining all the AI tools to make corporations more effective, to make manufacturing a lot more efficient. That is one train of thought. The second thread is investing in AI for consumers. And in that aspect, we are looking into AI devices. We think that Apple is eventually going to come up with innovation on their hardware next year, from foldable to a better camera. So we're all ready for what's to come.
That's great. I like that we are looking at all the different facets, all the different areas of
Mm-hmm.
opportunities
Yeah.
in AI, and it's not either or, but
Mm.
and. We're
Yeah.
also focusing on, just washing out through our bottom-up research on what are the next investment opportunities. I would like to switch gears a little bit and move to another industry that is equally interesting, and that's healthcare. And I think, that's something that you've touched on earlier. Are you seeing much opportunities within the healthcare space in China and Asia more broadly? And I'm also very sure that our audience would be very interested to know how do you factor in the potential tariff implications?
Yeah. So just it's a great question. I mean, this really harkens back to the DeepSeek question that we were talking about earlier. Going back to DeepSeek, as well as AI, in the healthcare industry, you have an abundance of Chinese scientists. They graduate hundreds of thousands of, chemists, biologists, in Chinese universities, as ones that were educated in the US and coming back to China to look for opportunities. So within the healthcare space, what we have seen is that within many Chinese biotech companies, they've been working around the clock to create molecules. Now, if you were to just develop medicine for China, it doesn't pay the bills because China is a single payer system. There's been tremendous pressure from the government to cut costs. But what's evolved interestingly is that Western companies, which are faced with tremendous patent cliffs, they go to China, they realize that these are legitimately valid molecules that are done, in compliance with the best manufacturing practices, the best scientific discipline. They would license in these molecules and conduct clinical trials in the US. So we love this sector because it's one where you are licensing intellectual property to US companies. Companies in China can receive an upfront payment as well as share in on the ongoing royalty should these molecules become successful overseas. We think that that's going to skirt some of the tariff controversy as they're not selling actual medicine overseas. So that's one. And to your second question about tariff, the beauty about the pharmaceutical industry is that gross margin is very high. And these are essential products. So ultimately, we think that the administration is going to come around to understanding that these are products that are life-saving. And I think that there will be a way around this tariff situation.
Got it. So, what I've been hearing is that there are actually quite a number of interesting investment opportunities across industries, specifically in IT and tech, healthcare, as well as
Mm-hmm.
industrials in China and also the broader region. But investing, it's never straightforward. So, my last question to you is, given your more than 2 decades of investment experience,
Yeah.
what are some of the blind spots and risks that you have learned to pay attention to when assessing companies?
Yeah, investing is very interesting because, when you have a lot of experience, you tend to apply certain rules of thumbs and heuristics to your stock picking. But a lot of times I think, sitting out here in Asia as well as having, my upbringing, my stock investing upbringing rooted in the West is that very very often I like to apply heuristics that would develop overseas, develop in the Western world to China. But then over the past few years, I realized that oftentimes it does not apply. For example, insane competition. A Western investor would, perhaps in the early days, stay away from BYD because it's trafficking in an industry that is insanely competitive. However, Chinese companies somehow, if they can, build enough moats, as in the case of BYD, they go vertically integrated. They do everything. They pressure their suppliers, and somehow they're able to build a moat within this competitive environment. So who are we to judge? They are, as it turns out, they've been able to make decent profit growth, even amidst insane competition. That's one. The second thing is just, how we apply Western orthodox to judging companies with low margin. I still remember the silicon carbide industry 2 years ago when you have a US company like Wolfspeed, which makes the best products. They try to maintain high margin. When they were up against the Chinese companies who don't really care about, yield, they may be even making a loss, but they did not care. So when you have these two worlds colliding with one another, you simply cannot apply Western logic and Western style of doing business on Chinese companies. So, every day I remind myself, whenever I try to apply these, rule of thumbs, I just stop short of that and go back to first principle. Think about, whether or not this company has the chops to grow their cash flow, to grow their profit.
That's great. Going back to the first principle and distinguishing between the Western and then also the Asian nuances when it comes to evaluating company. And so that's a wrap. We've touched on a lot of areas that hopefully give our audience a sense that this region is really exciting place for investing. But there are also aspects that investors need to watch out for. Essentially, the key to cutting through the noise and identifying long-term opportunities is really through deep, bottom-up fundamental research. Celia, thank you for the insightful sharing and a great investment conversation.
It's been fun, Andrew.
The Analyst View is brought to you by Capital Group, one of the world's largest and most experienced active investment managers. If you like what you heard today, please follow us on your favourite podcast platform as well as LinkedIn. Thank you for listening.
IP stands for intellectual property. DeepSeek is a Chinese AI company. Using what is referred to as a single-payer system, China has achieved near-universal health coverage through this multi-tiered system largely funded by the government. EV stands for electric vehicle. LLM stands for large language model, for which AI programs trained on massive amounts of text data to generate and understand human language. Model reasoning refers to the ability of AI models to break down complex problems into smaller steps, analyze them logically, and arrive at solutions similar to how humans think. Moat refers to a company's sustainable competitive advantages that protect it from competitors and help maintain its profitability over the long term. BYD is a Chinese multinational manufacturing conglomerate with subsidiaries including BYD Auto, which produces automobiles, BYD Electronics, which produces electronic parts and assembly, and FinDreams, a brand name of multiple companies that produce automotive components and electric vehicle batteries. Vertical integration is a business strategy where a company takes control of multiple stages of its production or distribution chain, essentially owning more of the vertical process from raw materials to finished product and sale. Heuristics are rules of thumb or simplified decision-making strategies based on experience, which may not always apply across different markets or cultures. This content is intended to highlight issues and be of a general nature. It should not be considered advice, an endorsement, or a recommendation. Products mentioned are not an offer of the product and may not be available for sale or purchase in all countries. All investments have risk and you may lose money. Past results are not a guarantee of future results. Statements attributed to an individual represent the opinions of that individual as of the date published and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Capital Group or its affiliates. This content is published by Capital Client Group Inc. and copyrighted to Capital Group and Affiliates. 2025. All rights reserved. For more information, including our detailed disclosures, visit www.capitalgroup.com/global-disclosures.